Do you remember growing your first $900 tomato and thinking, gosh, if I just had gone to the grocery store, it would have been way cheaper? Yeah, same. But we are not doing that anymore. Welcome to the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are going to build our farms, homesteads, and gardens without destroying our finances. So let's get that bag of soil and money. Welcome back to another episode of the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and we are making farming and gardening more accessible and affordable for everyone. And today's episode is a fun one. I will say that Thanksgiving is probably my least favorite holiday, so I don't know why I decided to do this episode. But today's episode is all about growing your own and raising your own Thanksgiving feast. Can we do it? How much does it cost? Is it cheaper to just buy it, or is it cheaper to raise it? I just want to say Thanksgiving is not the holiday for me. Sitting across from family members that you only see once a year that are judging you on your entire life and existence. Oh, what a treat. That's the dessert. Who needs the pumpkin pie? That right there, what a treat. But I do understand that some people love this holiday, and I myself love the food of the holiday, so let's focus on the food of the holiday. But before we get into that episode, and maybe unpack a little bit of my personal traumas, a message from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Duck River Apothecary Tea Blends. So our teas are designed to help you feel the best you can feel while also creating intention and routine in your daily life. So sit down, enjoy a cup of tea, designed to be enjoyed with our podcast. So sit down and enjoy it. It's the easiest way to support our podcast, and it makes an excellent holiday gift. So be sure and head over to duckriverapothecary.com, support our tea business, and support this podcast. All right, Thanksgiving. Now, I know you all want to start with the turkey part, but we are going with the sides first because let's be frank, we're all here for the sides anyways. No, oh man, I'm just spouting controversies this episode, but I wanted to start with the sides. In the process of growing some of the sides, I will say I'm leaving out cranberries, okay? We're not tucking into growing cranberries today. That seemed like a lot of admin, and I was not prepared to research cranberry cultivation for y'all. So if y'all are really interested in cranberry cultivation, I'll do a Christmas special just for you. You can let me know. But for now, we are talking about some of the vegetables that are most commonly served as side dishes for Thanksgiving. Now, I'm going to assume in this episode that you are already a gardener. We're not going to talk about the cost of setting up raised beds. We're not going to talk about the cost of fertilizer and soil, because we talk about those things all the time. Instead, we're going to focus really on the cost of growing these specific items in your garden and if it's worth it or not. So, starting off, potatoes. And they are probably one of my favorite. I love mashed potatoes. And of course, you would need butter and milk or whatever to create your mashed potatoes. There are lots of different potato recipes, even some like southern style potatoes that don't use butter or milk, which I found really interesting. But in general, mashed potatoes are something we love to see on our table, and they're incredibly easy to grow. So you can start growing mashed potatoes. Potatoes. We can't grow mashed potatoes. For about $4 to $8 a pound for seed potatoes. And they can produce, 10 plus pounds of potatoes. You can get quite a hefty yield off of a small amount of potatoes. So I do think it's pretty economical to go ahead and grow your own potatoes. It does cost, I think, a little bit more upfront to buy that initial pound of seed potatoes. But once the potatoes start really growing and getting ramped up, you can also save a portion of those seed potatoes and grow that same variety year after year after year in your garden. So if you're wanting to grow some potatoes, I think it's a really good option. I have noticed that potatoes in the grocery store are getting a good bit more expensive. So this could be a great way to start saving a little bit on growing potatoes. And just to say, potatoes typically store, so grow some storage potatoes, grow them earlier in the season, and then you're probably going to be enjoying those potatoes from storage in the winter months, depending on your location. Also, sweet potatoes are great. Sweet potato casserole, sign me up. I don't know if that's just a southern thing or if everyone does it, but I love some sweet potato casserole. And sweet potatoes are, I find here, at least in Tennessee, are even more productive than just standard potato varieties. So like I grow fingerling potatoes. I also grow purple potatoes, and I find that sweet potatoes are so much more prolific here. I think they just love the heat in the South, and they just thrive. So growing potatoes is a must, and you absolutely can do it. And I do consider this one of my top foods to grow if you're looking to build a more self-sufficient and sustainable life. Potatoes are easy carb source that you can grow and harvest at home. Great substitute for wheat or rice. Next up, we got carrots. A showy little side dish, the cutest little guys. You can grow so many carrots for so cheap. You can get a packet of carrots for $2 to $5. Granted, it's pretty cheap to buy carrots at the store as well, but just a small bed of carrots, you're gonna have like hundreds of carrots. And what I love about growing your own carrots for Thanksgiving is you can have access to these really cutesy carrots. So I'm talking like little rainbow carrots. You pull them up when they're not too big. So we're going for like little miniature carrots. Then we're going to roast the whole carrot. They're going to be a kaleidoscope of colors. Your friends and family, they're going to be like, ooh, look at this posh lady right here. That's right. That's what we're going for. And let me tell you, it's going to be substantially cheaper to grow those than buy those. And that's assuming you can even buy carrots like that in your area. So store-bought carrots, anywhere from $1 a pound upwards, depending on the types of carrots you get. But at home, you can really, really grow them for incredibly cheap. You can get pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of carrots just for a couple dollars worth of seed packets. So carrots, another great thing to grow. Something that I really like to do with carrots as well. This is another reason I think they're a great complement to potatoes in terms of trying to round out your self-sustainability and self-sufficiency, is carrots can be stored pretty much in the ground through winter. So at least in my area in Tennessee. So you don't have to worry too much about storing them. You can plant them out and you can literally just leave them in the ground, and the root typically will not rot. It'll typically stay just fine, and you just pluck them up as you need them, as you're going to use them. I think that's really just amazing. Next up, mean beans. Nothing says Thanksgiving like mean beans, okay? And I'm saying mean beans because my nephew famously called green beans mean beans for his like first 4 years of talking, and no one ever corrected him because we thought it was so doggone cute. But now he's a teenager that says mean beans, and now we're all adults that say mean beans, and we've realized we've got an issue and we've got to shut it down. But I'm talking about green beans. And yes, you can grow green beans. Now, the trouble with green beans is that you do need to preserve those green beans more than likely to ensure that they are good and fresh and available for Thanksgiving. This really depends on your area, but in my area, the types of green beans I grow are killed back by the frost well before we enjoy Thanksgiving dinner. So it becomes really important if you want to grow green beans to either flash freeze them or can them to make sure you have green beans at your disposal. This is completely doable, very, very simple, very easy to blanch and freeze green beans. I like to do it whole. So you got, again, a very nice, posh, fancy looking situation, but you can can them as well. Green beans are incredibly cheap to grow. So a couple of dollars for a packet and you will have more green beans than you know what to do with. Now, there are different types of beans. You have pole beans, which will grow up on a trellis situation, or you have bush beans. I personally prefer bush, even though a lot of people prefer pole beans. I like the bush beans just because there's a little less maintenance involved with them, and you don't have to worry about trellising them. If you're tight on space, you know, pole beans are great. That's fine as well. So, next up, we have the star of the show, squash. Now, squash is all encompassing here, right? So when I'm talking squash, I'm talking all of those winter squashes. We're talking butternuts. We're talking acorn squash. We're talking pumpkins. all of these things. Now, if you really want to show up and show out for Thanksgiving, you've got to grow some of your own winter squashes because it's a staple. And again, I also consider this vegetable a staple for self-sufficiency and self-reliance. There is a theme here because winter squash and pumpkins easily store in your home for months and months and months. There is a theme with Thanksgiving, and it's all this bounty, yes, but it's very different than summer style meals, right? We don't have all this freshness from tomatoes, etc. We have these really hearty vegetables, these vegetables that are storage vegetables. That's why we see carrots, we see potatoes, we see pumpkins and squash. And the reason for that is, it's traditional. Those are the things that we start to have after the frost dies off. And that's what we still have in abundance as we work our way through those during winter. So this is a must grow. Even if you're not growing it for Thanksgiving, I think it is great for all households to grow their own winter squashes. So this year I grew butternut squash. Historically, I grow loads of pumpkins. But it's just a few dollars for a pack of pumpkin seeds. The issue with pumpkin and winter squash is they're vining and they take up loads and loads of space. So they're not typically the most efficient at food production per square foot. You can listen to my episode that talks about the highest yielding vegetables, and they are probably one of the lowest yielding vegetables when you really start looking at the square footage that it takes. But if you have the space, they are excellent because you can store them and use them throughout the season. So if you have the space and space isn't an issue, this is a must grow, and they do produce loads and loads of squash and pumpkins. And pumpkins are actually very, very expensive. They are cheap per pound when you kind of look at it, but overall, they're quite expensive. So you can easily grow $50 worth of squash and pumpkins on a winter squash plant. So absolutely do it. Just remember, there are a lot of space requirements for these plants. My suggestions are growing butternut squash and acorn squash. These are both excellent winter squash. And then a variety of pumpkins. My favorite pumpkin to grow, and it's my favorite pie pumpkin ever, is Long Island cheese. And it does look like a wheel of cheese, and it's absolutely delicious. I mean, it's not fooling me because as someone who loves cheese, it's not a cheese substitute, but it does give a little bit of cheese vibes, and it's a beautiful pumpkin and really incredibly flavorful. Next up, and certainly not to be forgotten, is herbs. This is a no-brainer, and I have run an entire episode on growing herbs, and growing herbs is probably one of the single most valuable things you can grow in your own backyard. So it's very easy to grow hundreds and hundreds of dollars of herbs for just a few dollars worth of cost and investment. And it's really minimal on time expenditure to grow your own herbs. So of course, the holidays are packed with herbs. We've got thyme that we're seasoning things with. I mean, there's just so many different herbs that we're putting in the mix. So put that on your list, grow some perennial herbs, and make sure you have all of those for the holiday season. And if they're an herb that's going to die back, for example, my thyme plant is very, very winter hardy. I can harvest thyme pretty much all winter long. So it's just in that dead of winter that I don't have a lot of access to fresh thyme. But for Thanksgiving here in the South, I have plenty of fresh herbs still because the frost is not beating them down just yet. So absolutely worth growing, and way, way cheaper when you look at the fact that you can buy an herb plant for just a few dollars, or if you're buying the little packs of fresh herbs at the store, you're paying $2 per pack. A Thanksgiving dinner, you might need $12, $15. I mean, truly, you're gonna spend a lot on fresh herbs for Thanksgiving dinner if you want to be Francais. Now, last but not least, the showdown, the pinnacle of this entire thing, is raising your own turkey. Now, I think that's quite intimidating for most people, and for myself included. I have never once raised a turkey. Not one time. But for the sake of this episode, I wanted to talk about if you want to raise your own, your own turkey. Let's just say it's not cheap to raise a turkey. The figures that I have seen and run is it can cost like $80 to raise your own Thanksgiving turkey. I don't know if that's true. I ran a bunch of different numbers. There's a lot of different people who say different things, and I was struggling to find strong information on how much it costs to feed the turkey from the time it's a little baby poult all the way to when it's ready for turkey harvesting. But it does take 6 to 7 months at minimum. So you're going to need to start this turkey well in advance of Thanksgiving if your goal is to have your own Thanksgiving turkey. I think it's a really cool project and a really cool idea, but financially, this, out of all the things we talked about, is the thing that doesn't make the most sense. Now, there's a lot of factors going into this, but historically, poultry products are very, very cheap to grow. So when we think eggs, cheap to raise. When we think eggs, when we think chicken, when we think turkey, they're all mass produced and commercially farmed in ways that keep the cost incredibly low. So low, in fact, that to do it on a small scale at home oftentimes is substantially more expensive to do that than if you were going to just purchase it. Now, there's a lot of opportunity cost in that, in the sense that, by buying this, you don't have any control over the chemicals used to process these animals. You don't have control of antibiotics or, any sort of control over what they're feeding these creatures, right? Are they using GMO corn? Are they feeding them soy? Like, you have no control. So you do have to factor that in, right? And odds are, if they're being produced incredibly cheaply, they are being fed incredibly cheaply, and you have to decide what you want to put in your body, right? So I personally have bought a very commercially raised turkey every single year. I have never raised my own turkey, and I have never bought a heritage turkey either from a small local farm. There's always a chance I will change that. But if you do want to buy a heritage turkey from a local farm, from what I have read and from what I understand, it can truly cost, actually anywhere from $100 to $200 from a farm for that turkey, which is quite expensive. But remember, it's not as cheap for them to raise it. It's higher quality meat. I think it's great if you want to support a local farm. But going back to raising your own turkeys, you're going to spend quite a bit in feed, and that doesn't even include housing. So you're going to have to set up housing. So you're going to need potentially to have an enclosure, a house. So there's quite a lot that raising your own turkey would entail. And I think maybe if that's something you're interested in, we could definitely do a detailed breakdown episode where we really, really work through, is it feasible to raise your own turkeys, and if that's something you want to look at for a food source. But as a general, kind of reading between the lines here, I think for the average household, it doesn't make a lot of sense to raise your own turkey. So turkey became popularized for Thanksgiving due to the abundance of wild turkeys, right? So it wasn't that people were raising them on their own farms. It was just that's what was around, right? So, and maybe that's not correct. Maybe I'm wrong. So please feel free to fact check me, because I'm not a historian. But what I will say is it seems like that was the driving force behind choosing turkey. If you look at other different cultures around the world and stuff, one of the things that I think is really interesting is in Germany, they, for Christmas, harvest a Christmas goose. Now, geese, unlike turkey, largely and predominantly can eat grass. So they graze. Turkey are not grazers, they're foragers. So they eat like little seeds and little bugs, etc. Turkeys require a lot of feed that geese don't necessarily require. So I think there's something to that. I mean, there's definitely more efficient meat sources and food sources for your holiday table if you have a little bit of space that can be substantially cheaper to raise than raising out and feeding your own turkey. But might be something you're interested in, especially if you want to sell excess. So consider, if you do want to raise your turkey, consider raising yours, and then also partnering with other locals in your community that would like to buy a bird and have a home raised turkey and have that offset your cost of raising your own turkey, so you're not actively losing tons of money on this situation. And I think it is worth noting that it's probably just as much work to set up housing and enclosure for 1 to 2 birds as it is for multiple birds. And it's probably also just as much work to feed 1 to 2 birds as it is multiple birds. So that is something I would consider for sure. So final verdict on all of that, given all of that information. Final verdict, is it worth it to grow and raise your own Thanksgiving? Well, I say yes and no. Is it worth it to grow your own vegetables? Absolutely. I think almost all of those vegetables, if you have excess time in the week and you don't mind dedicating a little bit of that time to growing food, all of those vegetables can be grown pretty consistently, a lot cheaper than they can be purchased. Now, turkeys on the other hand, not so much. Turkeys are pretty consistently very cheap at stores, even during their inflated holiday period. They can be as cheap as 99 cents a pound. You're probably not going to have the ability to purchase one raise one for more or for less. Oh, I'm so confused. The point is, it's not super economical. Granted, if you are planning on purchasing an heirloom bird from someone in your local community, a local farm, it definitely would be potentially cheaper to raise it if you're going to consistently do so, because there is an investment in housing and that sort of thing. So I do think I can see both sides. It's important to grow more of your own food, but it's important not to go too much in the hole to celebrate Thanksgiving when you're sitting across from people that you really need to impress, but have no real actual desire to impress because you only see them once a year. I'm playing it fast and loose with the term need to impress. I will say that Aldi, which I'm an advocate for Aldi because a lot of things are already organic and it's very cheap and economical. They have said that they are providing Thanksgiving meals for families of 10 for $47. So you should be able to get everything you need from Aldi for $47. And as someone who is an advocate for growing and raising your own, I have a really, really hard time telling you not to do that, because let me just say, that's a steal. Feeding 10 people for $47 is a good deal any day of the week. As a matter of fact, I might just stock up and eat Thanksgiving a few times, So anyway, I hope regardless of what you decide to do, this might help inform you for your next year. And if you really do want to create self-sufficiency and food sufficiency in your life, consider mixing it up, because I think it's very, very doable to produce your own Thanksgiving meal really cheaply and grow and raise everything you need right here. But you don't have to follow the traditional classic meals and recipes. You can mix it up. You don't have to have a turkey. For example, ham. Ham can be a lot cheaper. If you decide to raise pork, pork can be a very economical thing to raise. So I think there is a lot of benefits and perks. And regardless of what you decide to do, I hope you have an excellent Thanksgiving filled with awkward conversations and full bellies. I'll see y'all next time.